Donald Trump is handing out tax breaks to the super wealthy while putting the burden on American families. No one better to discuss it with than former Senator Claire McCaskill, who's here to discuss. Welcome back to Defending Democracy. I'm Marc Elias. Let's get started. Senator Claire McCaskill, welcome to Defending Democracy.
Thanks, Marc. It's great to be with you.
It is.
What's nice is I'm actually having a conversation with you when I'm not calling you about something to do with compliance or other issues when I was a senator.
Yes, now we're just discussing the potential downfall of the entire country.
Exactly.
So let me start with just a little bit of background and set the table. You were a U.S. Senator from Missouri. Before that, you held other elected positions. Missouri was a purple state that increasingly got red. So you kind of lived the experience of what has happened at a macro level to many parts of the country. And now, you've had time to reflect on this. You've become a very successful commentator and analyst, among other things. What do you make of how we've gotten where we are in this sort of political moment with, Donald Trump and the craziness going on in the Republican Party?
Yeah, I think it is complex. It's like a stinky stew. What has happened? To start with, I think you had a master marketer, a guy who is all about marketing, not about governing, not about public policy, not about what's good for the country. Rather, what can he do to self-promote? And he saw the election of him as president as a giant self-promotion. So how was he going to sell himself to the people that he needed to win the election? And he figured out to mainline grievance. There's a whole bunch of people, Marc, in Missouri that have worked really hard. They've played by the rules. They can't afford to retire. They can't afford to take a vacation. They can't afford to send their kids to college. They're not doing as well as their parents. And they're kind of pissed off. And they felt like, especially with some of the really good progress we made on some of the social issues, like gay marriage, and like the fact that we were working hard at making our country more equal and opportunity more equal for people, Black and brown people and women. A lot of them were going, wait a minute, everybody's getting something but me. Nobody's taking care of me. So that's what Trump saw. He talked to those people. He heard them and he said stuff out loud that nobody had ever said out loud before. I mean, when he came down that escalator and said that all the Mexicans were rapists, that because he wanted them all to believe that it was Mexicans and not microchips that were taking their jobs. He wanted to believe, he set up bad guys, and the bad guys were people that didn't look like them, didn't live where they lived. And so that's what he did. And there was a really fertile ground for that in states like Missouri, Arkansas, Iowa, Indiana, the states that when I came to the Senate, they had Democratic senators. And now none of those states have any Democratic senators. Our state is a good example. In literally 10 years ago, the majority of our statewide office holders were Democrats. Now, none are Democrats. And there's veto-proof majorities in both the House and the Senate in Missouri. And clearly, the people they've elected to the United States Senate look nothing like who even the Republicans that Missouri elected, Kit Bond and Jack Danforth and even Roy Blunt. I mean, the folks that are there now have very little in common, even with Republican icons in my state. So playing to the lowest common denominator, America is going to pay a price.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit more about those Republicans and the transition, the non-Trump Republicans. But I want to take a second, just pause on something you said, because I think about this all the time. You came to the Senate in 2006. just before you got there, the Senate Democratic leader, Tom Daschle, was from South Dakota. We had two Democratic senators from South Dakota. Not long before that, we had two Democratic senators as you say, from Indiana, from Arkansas, we had Democratic senators in Florida. There were two Democratic senators in Montana, right? Like what you're describing was a very, and of course in Missouri, as you point out, you had Mel Carnahan, a very popular governor of Missouri. You had Democratic senators and members of Congress from various parts of Missouri, and so we have seen this dramatic change. And it's not just Donald Trump. Like, it isn't just that. So what do you make of what is behind this larger transformation of so many places where when I, came into politics and Fritz Hollings was in South Carolina, and John Bro was in Louisiana. I mean, I
Right.
could go on and on. What do you make of what has been really a transformation of the political map?
Well, the door has swung gratefully both ways. Some places,
Yeah.
I mean, we've got Arizona, and there used to be a Republican senator from Nevada, and there isn't anymore. So we've gained ground in some places, but honestly, part of it, Mark, is the dramatic change in how Americans are getting their information.
Hmm.
You didn't used to self-select the facts you want to believe in. And that's what the algorithms have done. I'll never forget, I have a nephew who I adore, and we were driving together down to the Lake of the Ozarks a couple of summers ago. And I said something, and he goes, "Well, Aunt Claire, that's because you're a socialist." And I went, "Oh, what? What?" Well, as it turns out, he had been watching Joe Rogan, or listening to Joe Rogan, I should say, and he was getting fed algorithms. And so the algorithms he was getting fed were all about affirming what the computers, what the system thought he wanted to hear. And so we now have these calcified bubbles of information or disinformation. And you never have to hear the facts laid out in a place where people have confidence they're getting factual information. And our democracy is in trouble because of Donald Trump, but it's really in trouble if we can't agree on what the facts are, because that's the essence of a compromise. That's the essence of how you move public policy, is agreeing on what the problem is. And then you go to work on how to fix it. But we can't agree on what the problem is because nobody will absolutely agree to what the facts are. So that whole thing with the internet, the demise of the investigative journalist, what you used to do, if you screwed up, it would get you in trouble. Now, if you screw up, especially if you're Donald Trump, it's like, well, he's not one of them. He's different. And so we're going to give him a pass. We're going to let him be lawless because he's trying to clean up the swamp and take care of all those cultural elites who have left us behind, most of which is frankly bullshit. The Democratic Party has looked after working people in this country much better than the Republican Party has ever. And this latest legislation they're proposing is more of the same. It is not looking after the people who are struggling paycheck to paycheck. It is all about the wealthy elite. But they have won a marketing war with those folks, and we're going to have to work very hard to get them back.
So, do you think that your former Republican colleagues, maybe they're more new than since you've left, that they weren't your colleagues, but do you think that they have changed, or do you think they're just playing a game? In other words, do you think they know better that what they're doing, for example, in throwing people off of Medicaid, do you think they know what they're doing in transferring money from the people who need it the most to the people who need it least, or do you think that it's that they are also living in kind of information bubbles, and they're true believers? In other words, are they scared and cowardly, or do they just not care?
The vast majority know, of my former Republican colleagues, and even some of the ones that have come since I left. They're playing a game, and it's called a game of survival. The pull of the power of a political office is very seductive, to say nothing of the fact that, I mean, I couldn't get over when I got there how deferential everybody was. I had never been treated like that in my life. I was like a street fighter, right? I was not used to people bowing and scraping, and so it's seductive, and you see people stay too long because the lifestyle is comfortable. And I'm not saying the work isn't hard. People who do it right work very hard in the Senate, as you know, Marc. Long hours, and it's not, putting your feet up on a cushion. I think a lot of them are embarrassed
Hmm.
about being quiet and not saying anything. I know for a fact many of them are embarrassed, and they know they're not doing the right thing, but they're rationalizing it. And here's how they rationalize it: if
Okay.
we're here, we can stop the worst stuff. Now, I challenged one I talked to not too long ago. Well, name me the cabinet official you stopped, because they're pretty bad. Some of these folks that have been put in these very important jobs. But in their minds, I will lose if I don't kowtow to him, if I don't genuflect, if I don't hide under my desk and not say anything. I will lose a primary election. And if I lose a primary election, I can't be here. The person who will be here instead is worse than I am. So therefore, they rationalize what they're doing, to say, this is how I hang in here. This is how I stay around the Senate. I can't speak as much to the House members because I don't know as many. I certainly don't know them as well. But I guarantee you this: the majority of the Republican senators know what Trump is doing is bad, and they know what they're doing is wrong, but they're trying to survive politically.
So what does that lead you to conclude with respect to the budget bill that's before the Senate now? This it would be a a a fiscally irresponsible bill, which Republicans used to say they were, you know, trying to get the fiscal house of the United States in order. It is cruel in many respects, and it targets poor people's health care, not just poor people, but people who, need health care. It targets their health care. It moves tax breaks to the wealthiest of the wealthy. Um, I keep reading that there is a I don't know, a pro Medicaid caucus, maybe of Republicans, that maybe there's a willing to stand up to Trump caucus of Republicans. But like you said, I haven't seen that actually materialize in past certainly not in the confirmation process. Do you think that they buck him on this, or they change the bill, or what?
Well, I think they'll change it a little bit around the edges. I don't think they'll go near the SALT deduction for your viewers and listeners. That's a state and local tax deduction that is so important to the moderate Republicans in the House. And I don't think they will cut, less than 1.5 trillion. Their job is a tough one, though, because they have to convince Americans that they're going to cut literally hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars from healthcare, and that somehow they're not cutting healthcare. That this is all waste, fraud, and abuse, which of course is total not true. They are going to make it more difficult for people to get Medicaid. They're going to put more of the burden on the states, and many of those states will not accept that burden because most of the states have to balance their budgets. They will make it harder for people to get insurance on the affordable healthcare marketplace. Less people will be able to access insurance through Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. So now, will they fold? Here's what I think. I think there are three senators who are immune to Trump's threats: Mitch McConnell, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins.
Hmm.
There has to be one more.
What about
Now,
Rand
do I
Paul?
think Rand Paul? Okay, there's four. But I already saw Rand Paul saying, well, if they just take the debt limit out of there, and you already see Ron Johnson, he's already beep, beep, beep. That truck is backing up already once he talked to Trump. I don't, and I think Tillis has a primary. Cassidy has a primary. Joni Ernst has a primary. All these folks have primaries that they are worried about, I think. And so I think they'll most will there be four to stop it? Maybe, but I wouldn't bet any serious money on it. They've all folded for everything so far. I mean, if you put Pete Hegseth in charge of our military, if you put Kash Patel in charge of the FBI, if you put Bobby Kennedy in charge of HHS, I don't have much faith you're going to do the right thing.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, my own view has always been that the Republicans will find the number of votes they need, then allow some number of the Republicans to appear to be, renegades. But look, Tillis, I forget which one he was the deciding vote on that he sort of flipped back on.
Hexeth.
Hexeth, yeah,
Yeah.
and so I don't put much stock in it either. What do you make of the departure of Elon Musk from the scene, or has he not departed the scene?
Oh, I think he's pretty much departed. I think this is a complicated guy. I think he's a genius, but I think he has real personal issues. I think he has possibly some mental health issues in terms of how he's. I mean, if you're getting ketamine for depression, that's serious stuff.
But what do you think it means, though? Do you think that the DOGE cuts are behind us? Do you think that damage will be repaired? Do you think Trump cares at all about
he could care less about debt. I mean,
Okay.
his entire life, Donald Trump has become very wealthy from debt. Taking bankruptcies, refusing to pay people. That has not fazed him in the least. I don't think he's ever, and by the way, Republicans in general, the only president in my lifetime that's balanced a budget was a Democratic president, not a Republican president. Every Republican has, grown the deficit, has increased the debt. I've never seen a Republican Congress or a Republican president take the fiscal condition of our country seriously. In fairness to them, people aren't that concerned about it. I said on air the other day, if debt and deficit were a big deal to the American people, we wouldn't have it. Because it's not. And so they don't really understand that when it hits, it's going to be like a tsunami. It's going to impact everything in their lives in terms of affordability. So, I think Elon Musk's DOGE, he was naive about how government works. He doesn't understand this isn't a business, it's a democracy. People who are elected to office are going to push back because the people who elected them are pushing back. People of great influence were pushing back on a lot of the things DOGE was doing. And I think also he was destroying his brand. I think Musk got a tremendous, I mean, can you imagine being so disconnected from reality that you don't know your brand is tied up in what people think of you? And when you start doing the stuff you do, offending your essence of your customer base, that your business is going to go to hell. And that's what happened to him. And now he's going to try to repair the damage. And it'll be interesting to see. But spending hasn't gone down since he started doing all that stuff. And by the way, all those agencies are hiring people back. I saw today that NOAA, the folks that do weather and so forth, they're busy rehiring people. So there's a way to cut government effectively. I worked on it very hard for 12 years. You can do it if you pay attention to GAO audits, if you really go after the extra, if you go after programs that are wasteful. But the way they did it was so disrespectful to wonderful government servants who do really good work every day. And the way they did it was so haphazard. I do think the permanent damage they've done, they have a co-conspirator there, and that is Marco Rubio.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that what he's done with USAID, that he went along with that because he knows better. And
what's confusing to me is, when he was a senator, wasn't he a big fan of USAID?
Absolutely. And a big hawk on Russia. And now he's busy doing the bidding for a guy who actually said that Ukraine started the war. And, he's helping dismantle programs of soft power that have really helped our country stay safe, that is literally killing, hundreds of thousands of children around the world. And I'm not going to let Marco Rubio off the hook here. And I'm not going to let Trump off the hook for Elon Musk or any of them. And nobody should let the Republicans off the hook for what Elon Musk did. It was highly irresponsible.
You mentioned brand and all of that. it is surprising to me, and there's not a lot that is left to surprise me, but it is surprising to me at how much Donald Trump is essentially just cashing in his position as president for direct personal gain. I mean, the crypto stuff, it's just like he's running an ATM machine for monetizing the office. And yet, you know, just think about what used to qualify as a scandal and what we're seeing now, and where is the outrage of this? Where is the media outrage? Where is the civil society outrage? The Republicans are useless, but are you surprised at just how much he is pulling off without seeming to pay any political consequence?
Yeah, he's auctioning off time with him for his
Right.
personal gain. And I remember when having a donor stay in the Lincoln bedroom was a big deal.
Yeah.
And Marc, I don't think people realize when I came to the Senate in 2007, you will remember this. The first bill we passed, Senate Bill 1, was the ethics bill. And the
S1.
ethics bill was did a lot of things. It kept people from flying in private airplanes at the expense of lobbyists. Meanwhile, we've got Qatar giving the president a $400,000 airplane. It actually prohibits members of Congress from going to dinner with a lobbyist. Okay. Now lobbyists are paying directly to the president personal money to spend time with him. I mean, they're putting money in his pocket. It's called graft. It's called corruption. It is incredibly corrupt. I do not understand why. And I think part of it is the Trump people rationalize it by saying, well, he was already rich. He's not like a Joe Biden or somebody who only got rich from government. He came into government rich. He's given up a lot of money to be in government. Well, first of all, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure he was as rich as he always claimed to be. But the essence of it is still the same. He's taking money from people personally as they try to influence him on pardons, on legislation, on regulation. He's enriching himself and his family. It makes Hunter Biden's Burisma board chairman look quaint in
Yeah.
comparison what they're doing. It's unbelievable.
And yet, the right-wing media and even much of the mainstream media continues to beat up on the Bidens, and Donald Trump, gets a lot less scrutiny.
Yeah, it is. And there is something going on in the media where the both sides stuff
Yeah.
is you're trained as a journalist to be fair. You're trained as a journalist to give both sides. None of that training occurred, that cultural background for journalists, with a Donald Trump as a reality. And so I think the media has really struggled. I'm proud I'm part of a network where I've never been told to cool it.
You wouldn't listen to them if they did.
I probably
I mean,
wouldn't.
honestly, anyone who knows you, if they tried to tell you to cool it, you'd heat it up.
I'd heat it up until they told me I couldn't work there anymore. But but I hope that my heat all comes. I believe it all comes from being factually based and being a passionate advocate, somebody who spent a lot of time in a courtroom, unlike some of the people that are at DOJ now and the FBI. I and I worry that we are letting Donald Trump, because of the fire hose stuff that's going on. There's so many things that are happening that are outrageous, that some of the stuff that's really outrageous is getting a pass and it shouldn't be. I will say this, though. I don't think history will be kind to
Yeah.
either Donald Trump or to the people who have enabled him.
No, I think that's entirely right. I mean, I think that, for a lot of these Republicans who you say know better, like, history will record them for what they did and what they didn't do. And they're not gonna get a pass because someone would have been worse if it wasn't them. So
The irony is Trump's fixation with tariffs is probably going to be his political kryptonite. I people are not going to care until they can only afford ramen. And then they're going to care a lot, because a lot of folks who voted for him, his base, they believed he was going to bring down costs for them. They believed he was going to make their lives better. And he's not. And it's going to get worse because of tariffs. Inflation will get worse. And politically, that's going to be very difficult for both Donald Trump and for the people running in the midterms and for all the people who have supported Donald Trump.
I'll be right back with more of my conversation with Senator McCaskill in a moment. But, Republicans are on a mission, and it's to destroy the right to vote and end free and fair elections. And Democracy Docket is on a mission, too, to stop them. But it needs your help. For just $10 a month, you can become a premium member to get access to exclusive events, insights from me, and much, much more. Please become a premium member now at the link above or in the description below. So one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on is I have resisted since the election talking to guests about the future of the Democratic Party. Part of it is I find that a lot of the analysis that came very quick was very glib. It was based on people's sort of sense of what they thought happened. I think that there has been too much negativity aimed, and I don't believe in fights between, when you got Donald Trump in the White House, I'm not really interested in hearing which faction wants to do a tell-all about some other faction or settle a score. But I have to ask you, because you're not just someone who has been very successful in politics, but also has some distance from it. But also, you were very, very you were known as one of the smartest political brains in the campaign sense of that in the Senate. So I'm just curious, what's your take on where the Democratic Party stands, where it needs to go, what it should be paying attention to, what it should just sort of be shaking off and not paying attention to? What's your assessment of where the party stands right now?
Yeah, well, I agree with you. The last thing in the world we need to do right now is be picking on somebody like David Plouffe. I mean, give me a break. You know,
Right.
and I do like to caution people, history is important because it gives you context. I remember distinctly sitting in the United States Senate in 2009 and watching the Republicans go through exactly what we are going through in 2025. Barack Obama burst onto the scene. He inspired people. He won places that nobody thought he had any business winning. I mean, he won counties in Missouri that voted for Donald Trump by 80% last time. So this was an extraordinary victory that he marked down in the history books, and the Republicans didn't know what to do with it. And there was a lot of arguing. There was a lot of, what did we do wrong? How we're never going to win another election. This is the end of the line. We've got too many old people. We've got too many extremists. And it was a mess for them. And then, somebody emerged, and he got everyone to coalesce around him. It was a guy named Donald Trump. And eventually, um, and there was a backlash, I think, among some of the people I talked about earlier in the podcast, that I'm not saying they're racist, because they're not racist, but deep down, it was hard for them to look at this amazing, gorgeous African-American Black family being the most powerful family in the world, because they deep down kind of thought, well, I'm ahead of that. It is racist at its core, but they aren't consciously racist. And so all of that contributed to Donald Trump emerging. So here's what I think is going to happen now. Are leaders too old? Listen, they're leaders, and they've been there a long time because they're good at what they do. I don't think people realize what Chuck Schumer accomplished during Biden's first 2 years. He kept everybody together in a situation that was a lot like what Mike Johnson has in the House right now on the Republican side. So, should people go home when they're, beginning to really have problems like Barbara Mikulski did, and like Barbara Boxer did, and like many senators have done? Yes, they should. They should not stay past their shelf life, so to speak. But Young people shouldn't get elected just because they're young, and old people shouldn't be kicked out just because they're old. The leaders that are strong, that are able to communicate forcefully and capture the imagination and the inspiration of the American people will emerge from the Democratic Party. And that will be our candidate for president. And I think everybody just needs to take a deep breath, stay focused on the basics. Is the economy improving? Is your health care more available? Are your prescription drugs more affordable? Are you feeling good about the environment and the direction it's going? And if we focus on those things and not get caught up on, is it what faction the Democratic Party is, or, as much conversation about pronouns, but rather conversations about empowering people rather than their pronouns, making sure they're not being discriminated against, making sure hate is not okay. I think a leader will emerge. And I think as long as they're bold and can speak plainly, I think the days are gone when you're going to have a successful candidate for president that takes 5 sentences to say what you could say in 5 words. I think the method of communicating has to be cleaner and crisper and more real. I don't think people should use, Harry Truman and Mark Twain are from my state, and they were both men who always believed that a $25 word was not as valuable as a nickel word. And I think that's really what our leaders need to think about, how they connect with people in a way that's relatable, not how can they impress people how much they know and how great they are. And that person will emerge, that person will run for president, and I'll make a bold prediction. That person will win in 2028.
All right. Since you're in the election prediction game, talk to me about the 2026 midterms. It's kind of a tough Senate map, but it's not an impossible Senate map. There are opportunities for Democrats to gain seats in the Senate. North Carolina, Tom Tillis, who you mentioned, he's got a primary. He's also, I think, got problems in his state. Susan Collins in Maine always remains potentially vulnerable if she runs again. Joni Ernst seems to be on a self-destruction mission.
What was that? Holy cow.
Was that? The House seems like there are, very closely divided seats. Is it too early to gauge what you think will happen in the midterms, or do you have a sense of that?
Well, if I knew what the economy looks like in jobs and unemployment and inflation this time next year, I could tell you for sure. But I do believe we'll take the House. The Senate's a little harder. And a lot of it is candidate quality, as you know, Marc. A really good candidate can win races they're not supposed to win. Now, you've seen it time and time again, that candidates that are really good and that know how to communicate and work really hard can win in places that no one expects them to win. I know you have a lot of people who listen to this and watch this and respect you. I plead with them in terms of them being donors. Please be strategic about where you give your money. You may not think Chuck Schumer is the best leader for this time, but I can assure you the DSCC will deploy your contributions in ways that are strategic and smart. Pay attention to these races. Is it possible that Dan Sullivan can get beat in Alaska? Well, it depends on who's running against him, but it's possible. It wasn't that long ago that we had a Democratic senator. I served with a Democratic senator from Alaska.
Marc.
Yeah. Is it possible that you could have a Democrat win in Louisiana? Possible, especially if Cassidy gets beat in a primary, especially if the former Democratic governor runs there. If the former Democratic governor in Kansas runs, if Laura Kelly ran, Marshall would have a race on his hands because he's a wackadoodle.
If Paxton wins in Texas right now, Paxton looks like he could beat John Cornyn.
Run away with it. And then you've got another, but just don't do, I love Amy McGrath. She's great, but so much money was given against Mitch McConnell without people really thinking about, okay, how strategic is this donation? If people are strategic with their donations, and I'm talking grassroots now, because that's where most of the money for the Democratic Party is now coming from, grassroots donations. If they're strategic, I think we've got a shot in the Senate. I think we have a better shot than many people think we do right now, especially if they pass this bill, and especially if the tariffs continue to create this economic chaos, I think we're going to be poised to potentially take the whole thing in 26.
All right. Well, from your mouth to God's ears, my last question for you. I'm sure you get recognized probably more now than you used to, even when you were a senator. Now that you're on television, people stop you on the street.
Certainly in New York, I do.
And there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people out there who who watch you and who are watching this video, and they are scared and they are nervous. They think that Donald Trump is an existential threat. I agree with them. I know you do. An existential threat to their way of life, existential threat to the economy, what he's doing with tariffs, to their healthcare, and also to democracy. That he has tendencies that lean very strongly towards authoritarianism and dictatorship. And they want to just sort of retreat. They are afraid. They are afraid. They don't, and they don't know what to do. And so what do you tell that person? What do you tell the person who's just overwhelmed by it all, that they should do, or they should think, or they should, breathe deeply? Like, what is your advice to them?
Yeah, I think our biggest danger right now, if you look at the polling, Mark, for the people who are paying attention, Donald Trump's in big trouble. It's the people who aren't paying attention. It's the people who are tuning out because it's too messy and they're sick of it and they don't want to deal with it. And that's frankly on a lot of independent voters. And as you well know, folks who don't call themselves Democrats or Republicans decide who is president of the United States. They make the decision. It's not the people that go to the Truman dinner or the Obama dinner. It's not the people going to the Reagan dinners. It's the people that are not watching cable TV. They're watching Dancing with the Stars, or they're watching, Housewives of Atlanta. So these folks, what you need to do first is not tune out. You need to, secondly, encourage people around you not to tune out. Don't tell them what to think. Don't tell them they're dumb. Don't tell them they're idiots if they think Donald Trump's okay. Just try to help them tune in. And that could be as simple as, sending them different articles that maybe present a different point of view, cut into that calcified algorithm that's just feeding them Fox News stuff. And then find something you believe in. It doesn't have to be political. If you find something you believe in, you're working on, whether it's a school board race or whether it's an issue in your community, the more democracy continues to behave like a democracy, the safer we are. If everyone just shuts their doors and goes not on their front porch to greet their neighbor, but their back deck with a privacy fence, and looks at their 401k every day and just prays it's not going to get worse, that's when democracy's in trouble. But whether you're getting involved in your church or you're getting involved in a civic organization or a political campaign or a local issue, do something outside your comfort zone, because that is how the democracy will stay healthy. And by all means, try not to insult too much the people who disagree with you, because ultimately we need a big chunk of them to come back home to the American values that we care about so much.
Well, Senator, I'm not going to ask you to run for office again. I did that on MSNBC and you already said no, but I hope you reconsider. And when you do, I will be right there alongside cheering you on.
Yeah, well, I'm not. I will never run for
America
office
was better
again.
when you were in office.
I'm not going to run again, but I can tell you this: I'm never going to tune out, and I'm going to continue to do what we can to make sure America stays the America that we all love, and not one that we don't recognize.
Well, thank you, Senator Claire McCaskill. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Defending Democracy. Please make sure you're subscribed to this channel and to Democracy Docket's newsletters to stay informed on the latest voting rights and democracy news.